Sometimes a location is just a gold mine for images, and I think Moonshiner's Arch in the Red River Gorge is just that. Now, who truly knows how much moonshine came out of Moonshiner's Arch in the Red River Gorge? Maybe none, but anyway, I will tell you this. It is capable of yielding some images though. And I think there's a few that are just spectacular images. The problem is this. It's the high dynamic range of the situation. And I know, don't click off the channel yet. Everybody hears high dynamic range and they just click away because nobody wants to do it because it's so challenging. It really is. But the advantage that I have today is the calm winds. I was here a few days ago and I captured some images and it was calm winds and I was able to do some blending in Photoshop and come away with a couple of good images. But it is difficult to blend these things together. The hard part about blending images in Photoshop is if there's any movement in the leaves, in the branches, in the trees, anything moving in the image is going to cause ghosting. And honestly, if I've got ghosting in my composition, it's no good to me. I don't want an image that has ghosting in it. I can handle some motion blur from the leaves moving around, but I cannot handle just a terrible blended image in Photoshop. And so I try to avoid that. I think the best thing you can do is expose to the right. Now, if your dynamic range is not several stops out, you can expose to the right. In other words, ETTR as it's called. And what you do is you expose for the highlights. You get the highlights just far enough to the right to almost clipping to where you can actually bring back the details in Photoshop. And still be able to pull the shadows out and capture a pretty good image. But the problem with shooting in caves or arches like this, and you're shooting out into a sunlit scene, is the dynamic range is often several stops out. So you end up not having a lot of choice. I mean, we shouldn't shy away from bracketing, although I will say if there's a lot of motion, wind out in the scene, I'm not even going to waste my time. I'm not going to shoot a bracket set because it's not going to come out. But regardless, I think this location is certainly fantastic for a number of compositions. I love these rock formations. The moss covered rocks provide good compositions. I think you could go minimalistic here too and put a longer lens on and kind of zoom into some of these compositions. Just some of the flora is just beautiful, and you could just zoom in on that and go minimalistic and capture some good images. But the point is that I think sometimes we find these locations that they're just like fruit trees, and they're just ripe for the plucking. And I think this arch in any season is a good time to come here and try to capture images, because I think you can come away with a variety of different images. There's opportunities for snow cover here. There's opportunities for icicles. There is a world of opportunities here in the summertime. I think I'm going to come back and continue to shoot this arch. So I think that this location is going to be one that I frequently visit because I think it's going to be a gold mine for compositions. I think one of the problems with a gold mine like this, even though it's an image yielding machine, the problem is it's so vast. It's huge, it's enormous. There are compositions everywhere, but there's also a lot of distracting elements. It's chaotic. There are branches, rocks, everything. There's water, there's moss, there's trees, there's branches, there's leaves. Everything can be a distraction. And when you have a lot of chaos in your scene, it's hard to find a composition. So I think the point is that when you have these gold mines like this, and you have that feeling, and most of us do, we know, we walk up to a scene and we're just wowed by the scene. And then it's the second trip or the third trip, and we start to be a little bit more picky and start to look deeper into the scene. And that's when you start to notice things that you didn't notice before. I think the point is don't worry about the chaos. If you walk up to a scene like this, I think my first impression was I walked up and I was like, oh, that's pretty chaotic. I don't know if I can pull a composition out of here or not. But, and maybe you can't, but at least you give it a shot. And I think the thing to take away here is come to the scene, bring a chair, sit down, relax, look around, take your time. And time is what you have to have if you want to come out of a scene like this with a good composition. And I know I don't need to remind anybody of this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Lighting is key. Timing is everything. And sometimes these things work against you. Truly, it's probably more often than not. They're working against you. You don't have time to come down and just leisurely take your time, but that's why you have to revisit locations over and over and over again so that you can really digest the location, line up your composition, know what that composition is, and then come back when the light is right to make that composition come alive. And I think that's the key. I see things like those two holes there, and I'll tell you, I just, my eyes are drawn to it. And I think that's something to think about. When your eyes are drawn to something, there's a reason. And just kind of analyze it and take a look at it and think about, well, what is it about that scene that you like, and how do I line that up? And I always say, don't, think of, the rule of thirds, it's not a hard, fast rule. It's a rule like many rules, meant to be broken, but it's a good guide. And keeping the rule of thirds in mind, keeping diagonals in mind, keeping compositional balance in mind. Weighting your composition is super important. I think to make a good composition, you've got to have balance. So where is the light hole at in reference to the boulders in the foreground? Things like that are what I think a good photographer keeps in mind when making a composition. And it's true, we might not have all the time in the world to compose these images, and you might not have all the time in the world to come back. In fact, you could come to a location and it's the only time you're ever going to be there. You have one shot. And you may and likely will miss numerous compositions. And you might even look back over video footage later and think, oh, wow, that was a good composition. In fact, I had eyed some compositions here today that I had looked over previous video footage from last week and thought, oh, you know what? Let me go back and revisit that. So it's just a way of kind of using what you have to evaluate a scene and come back to it and make the most of it. I think the takeaway for this week's video is this. When you have a gold mine, take advantage of it. Use it to your fullest. But most of all, enjoy it. Take in the scene and embrace it. And you know what? If you come away with some good images, man, that's fantastic. And if you don't, well, you don't. It's still a grand experience being here in Moonshiner's Arch in the Red River Gorge. Well, if you enjoyed this video, you may enjoy last week's video if you haven't seen it. And I'll leave a link to that in the end in the video description. And if you like this video, make sure you hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. And as always, if I don't see you down the road, maybe I'll see you somewhere out here on the trail. I captured roughly the same composition in last week's video, except for a few minor details. Although happy with that image, I felt the sky looked slightly washed out, and it lacked detail in the clouds. With a little luck, I was able to capture a bit more color this time, and significantly improve the final image. Discovering a gold mine is only the tip of the iceberg. Developing the raw ore into a work of art, well, that's another feat altogether. I'm delighted with this composition. The diagonals provided by the arch and the leading lines of the moss-covered stones, they lead the viewer through the image and into the forest. Indeed, looking at this image, I can still feel the cold, wintry ambiance, hear the flowing water of the river below, and smell the moist country air, all unique to the Red River Gorge. It's as if I were standing there now.